Bitcoiners, good morning. Where do I sats? We got a good morning, everyone. Don't spoil it. The sun is up and Bitcoin is running, right? So let's do a few more good mornings and then we'll have our sip, right? Let's do a few more good mornings. I can confirm the sun and Bitcoin is up in Florida. We're getting somewhere. P-Man Van says the sun is up and Bitcoin is just fine. It's Moscow time. It's coming. It's coming. We got some excellent Moscow time today. Sean, sun is up in Niagara. I bet it's beautiful there. Great to hear, Sean. I hope the sun is up everywhere or is not up as it should be. I hope you're not getting any weird sun anomalies today. We're on schedule, right? Bitcoin running just fine. Let's have a coffee and talk about what's new. Right? Lots of stuff. All right. Fun Moscow time today. Real fun stuff. So, now, as you know, around here, we never fat shame, right? We understand it's very difficult for everyone. Not an easy thing, not a simple thing of why don't you diet? Why don't you just eat steak? Or why don't you go keto? Right now, all these things do work. But we're dealing with receptors and parts of your brain and dopamine and satisfaction. So all I want to say is I have a lot of empathy for anyone who struggles with this. So we're not laughing at anyone. We're laughing at a headline, right? And it's not good, but let's read it, right? So this is from NBC News, right? So childhood obesity rates continue to rise in the US, affecting nearly 1 in 5 kids and adolescents. To combat it, experts are calling for early and intensive treatment for some children. That may include weight loss medications. What to know about weight loss drugs for teens? There you go. What to know. Here's another one. So the Scottish National Party, they love wind farms. They got a lot of wind in Scotland. Why not, right? Where do you put them, though? So this is what happened over in Scotland. The SNP admits to felling 16 million trees to develop wind farms. So they cut 16 million trees for some clean energy. So that's good stuff, guys. Here's another good one, right? This is from CNN, right? Scared by that new report on climate change. Which one? They don't mention. It's just that new one, right? So scared about that new report on climate change? Here's what you can do to help. Number 1, eat less meat, about 30%. All right, everyone, you got to cut your protein down and your fresh meat and your beef. So if you had like 10 steaks a week, you got to cut 3 of those out, is what it's saying, right? So you cut it by 30%. Swap your car or plane ride for a bus or train. All right, so you just get in that bus, get in that train. Don't fly, don't have a car. And here's the other one. This one's easy. Use a smart thermostat at home, right? The digital one, right? You want that. So there you go. Now, someone in this CNN thing reminded us all. Now, I didn't fact check this. His name is Adam Johnson NYC. He says, reminder that 100 corporations are responsible for 71% of the global greenhouse gas emissions, and presenting the crisis as a moral failing on the part of individuals without noting this fact is journalistic malpractice. So there you go. We've moved from Moscow time into reality here. And this journalistic malpractice that he's talking about, right, that I don't know if it's true, the numbers, but they sound right. And I don't, there's no need to really get into the details about it, I don't think, because the premise here that we can't trust the news is pretty obvious to most people at this point. And this whole idea of presenting it as a moral crisis for individuals, even though it's just a handful of companies that are responsible for most of it, is, I think, what Adam is saying here, journalistic malpractice. Not only is it journalistic malpractice, it looks a little bit more like hypnosis than it does anything else. Look, be careful, don't eat the meat, you're going to ruin the world. And it's so bad, the journalistic malpractice that they're referring to, it might be the crisis of our times, and we're going to talk about that. And why I bring up this idea of crisis of our times is because I was poking around with the Fourth Turning is Here book, because I noticed Johnny Rico was mentioning it yesterday. Now, let me just tell you something. I'm a big fan of the frame of the Fourth Turning. I learned about the Fourth Turning from Willy Woo. I was He and I were doing a session at South by Southwest in 2019 on Bitcoin at the bottom of the Bitcoin market. But Bitcoin was like $3,000 that day when we were on stage. And Willie, so when we arrived in Texas for this thing, it's in Austin, Texas. Because it was a headline on South by Southwest, they did up our rooms like we were celebrities. So there was chilled champagne when you got in, and there was all kinds of freebies like chocolate and tequila, and it was pretty fun. And Willie had brought his wife, and so Willie and his wife, who's from Canada, in case people don't know, I hope in case you didn't know, Willie Woo had actually lived in Montreal for a little while in his life, so pretty neat thing. So Willie and I were sitting in this room looking at the beautiful river in Austin, Texas, that flows behind the hotel, and we had this beautiful bottle of champagne, and we just sat down and were enjoying it, right? And Willie mentioned to me this fourth turning thing. And I was like, what are you talking about? It sounds stupid, right? But inevitably, I learned about it. And I will tell you that Raoul Pal from Real Vision did an excellent series that same summer in 2019 on the fourth turn. He had an interviewer go and spend time with Neil Howe. I think it's about an hour and a half long. Neil Howe, the only surviving of the two authors who wrote the original Fourth Turning book. So now Neil Howe comes out with a sequel, Fourth Turning is here. Now, this is all this context to say I became a student of the Fourth Turning at that time. I completely, not regret, but I laugh at myself when I was like, Willie, what are you talking about? Right? Willie convinced me there that it was worth looking into. So that's why I got into it. But this idea of the fourth turning as a frame to view history, to make predictions, totally down with it. Talk about it all the time here. Now, there's an addendum to that. Neil Howe, the surviving writer who wrote this book, might be an idiot. Right? He might be. and by that, I mean, he might be the type of person who's too ensconced in academia, the ivory tower. Now, I know he had a private business. He was a marketing consultant and all this kind of stuff. But as things were happening in the last days of the Trump administration, he was going on about, maybe the Trump administration is the crisis and all this stuff. So look, he's a shit lib. You got to just admit it, right? And by that, I mean, he consistently doesn't see things in front of his eyes and can make a lot of mistakes in just perception of the world around him. Now, I will not stop loving his book. I will not stop loving his frames. I listen to his interviews. I have a lot of appreciation for what he says, but people can get details wrong, right? You can get it right about the big picture and then miss a lot of the things. So when I'm looking at his new book, Fourth Turning is Here, I haven't read the book. I probably won't. I'm not a fan of the writing. I'm more of a fan of the frame and all that stuff. But I've been looking for if I should read the book and looking for quotes that are out there. And someone shared a few quotes today, and I wanted to bring them up just because they, I think anyway, give us a sense of where things are headed in the short term and, can give us some context in which to understand things. But I'm going to point out his mistakes, what I think are his mistakes, or what I think he's missing, his blind spot. It's just a blind spot. We all have blind spots, right? Everyone has blind spots. What I hope we can do here in the morning with the system of comments and talking about the news this way and interaction and dialogue that we create is to avoid blind spots. We have to avoid blind spots. We all have blind spots. All of us have blind spots. You got to eliminate as many blind spots as you have, and that's the only way you can defend yourself against cognitive dissonance. And by also reminding yourself you might not have all the answers. You have to say that as a system. Maybe I'm wrong, right? That's another way to give yourself an out in the future in case you do have to change your mind about a certain thing. So I try to practice that as a matter of habit and system. But here are some of the quotes that I wanted to mention about the fourth turning. So he says this: America entered its most recent fourth turning in 2008, placing us 15 years into the crisis era. Each turning is a generation long, about 20 to 25 years. And it is likely that this turning will be somewhat longer than most. By our reckoning, therefore, we have about another decade to go. What typically occurs in a fourth turning, the initial catalyzing event, the deepening loss of civic trust, the galvanizing of partisanship, the rise of creedal passions, and the scramble to reconstruct national policies and priorities, all of this has already happened. So far, I'm 100% in agreement with Neil Howe. Here's what he says, though. Every fourth turning unleashes social forces that push the nation before the era is over into a great national challenge, a single urgent test or threat that will draw all other problems into it and require the extraordinary mobilization of most Americans. We don't yet know what this challenge is. Historically, it has always been connected to the outcome of a major war, either between America and foreign powers or between different groups within America or both. But pause, pause. Neil Howe just said out loud, we don't know what the current challenge is. We got stolen elections. We've got lies that are perpetually told to us every single day. We've got a financial system that is actually psychotic and doesn't understand up or down any longer, it just shovels more money into the system. We have no idea what's going on in the war in Ukraine. None. We have no clue what's going on over there. If anyone's telling you this is it's a lie. You can't tell. It's just spin, spin, spin. It might be versions of the truth, but it's not that. In the end, one of the major problems is you can't actually go to any resources to get any news whatsoever. The data is all wrong. Look at the Stanford guy. The Stanford president had to quit yesterday because they found out that all of his papers are a scam. He hasn't written. The Stanford president is a scammer, right? And you can go back, right? We think a lot about, and I mention it often, the Michael Crichton piece, Aliens Cause Global Warming. He pointed out already 20 years ago that science had become more like product selling and marketing than it had become science or more scientific. It was absolutely more about marketing, market placement, and the hypnosis of sales than it was anything to do with science. And he was using at the time the Drake equation, which was complete fake science to prove aliens exist, right? The Drake equation, one of the stupidest pseudoscientific equations ever created. And all kinds of smart people will say, oh, the Drake equation, like they're intellectuals or something. It's actual mental handicap math. It doesn't make any sense. This is how many solar systems there are. Fake. They don't know. This is how many galaxies there are. They don't know. They don't know any of these things. And they just made a mathematical equation out of it. Now it looks like math, right? It's not hard to make something look like math. You throw some algebra and some unknown constants they derive values for just off the top of their head, right? Complete gobbledygook, made up pseudoscience. And at the time, Michael Crichton was pointing that out, that this pseudoscience was going to become a major problem, that by not having any reference material to understand what's going around us, and by using politics as a political hypnosis tool, and by using science as a political hypnosis tool, that we were setting ourselves up to be completely lost in time and in space and in what's going on around us. And so it's entirely predictable that we would end up in this position, just literally not knowing what's going on in the world and having to trust new and different sources like Bitcoin community plebs, right? That's what we're left with, guys. We're left with us, right? And there's other people out there doing stuff too. But if it wasn't for Twitter and if it wasn't for social media and if it wasn't for our ability to have these direct person-to-person communications, we wouldn't be anywhere. And if it wasn't for the world's most eccentric billionaire buying a social media company at a completely ridiculously inflated rate, burning billions of fake dollars in order to give us this opportunity to have these conversations, we would be even more confused and angry and all this stuff. So right away, Neil Howe has been missing for a long time. I've been saying this, the actual crisis in the room. He was on the road in COVID time talking about how Trump, of course, was the big crisis, but not in a oh, it's the reaction to Trump that's the problem. It was actually Trump that was his problem. Right now, I don't think he is as Trump derangement syndrome as most people. And I think he wanted to get mainstream news appearances. So he had to say the thing that they would want to hear. He couldn't just say, oh, well, actually, it's the reaction to Trump that's the big forthturning proof, right? He couldn't say that because they wouldn't invite him back on, right? So he wants to get invited on. He's got to say these things. But this frame that he's used here, this idea that America doesn't actually know what its crisis is, I think means he was another one of those people that didn't pay attention yesterday. Look what we found out yesterday. Yesterday, you had an IRS agent come to the Congress to testify about Biden stuff, right? So this is what Glenn Greenwald says about what happened yesterday. 2 IRS whistleblowers are currently testifying before Congress under oath about the multi-pronged pressure applied to the Department of Justice to protect Hunter Biden from more serious prosecution. Nobody watching CNN or MSNBC would, of course, have any idea that this was happening. Like, none, right? And isn't that true? so that you have a whole group of the population that just thinks the whole Hunter Biden thing is just solved. And maybe it is. Maybe I'm the one getting hypnotized by IRS agents. And I'll tell you a bit of their testimony saying this is unprecedented. This was absolutely political, and all the other information they gave. But this idea that we're unaware of our crisis in America, we're unaware of national security interests throwing people like Julian Assange in jail and not allowing Edward Snowden out, and calling RFK a conspiracy theorist because he has questions about his dead father and his dead uncle and the murderer of his dead uncle and the murderer of his murderer of his dead uncle. That he's asking questions about this means that somehow he is a conspiracy theorist. So the idea that we don't know what the crisis is when we see psychological operations inflicted on Americans at a machine gun rate, right? The Gatling gun that was invented in the Civil War is not bullets anymore. It's psyops just being pummeled onto the American people at a persistent rate, at a constant rate, at a rate of saturation, so that most Americans don't really know what's going on in the world. How could they, right? It's lie after lie after lie. So, and exactly as Glenn Greenwald says here, they don't even know about this stuff. If you ask any one of these people that Neil Howe is trying to impress here, all of his shit-lib friends, if you ask any one of these people, what about the testimony yesterday? They're going to look at you like this, right? Like, what? Hunter? Isn't it about people wanting to see his dick pics and porno, right? That's what they'll say. Here's what Jonathan Turley said we found out yesterday. So first of all, if you guys don't follow Jonathan Turley, you must. He's one of the most clear legal minds out there. I'm not a fan. I went to law school with Viva Frei. I love Viva Frei. He's cool, but he spends too much time with that Barnes guy. Barnes, not great for me personally, as someone who's interested in law and interested in not jumping to conclusions because it's great for your dopamine and all that. He's one of these guys who, Barnes, I've seen anyway, jumped all on top of vax conspiracy. No, I don't want to say conspiracy. He talks about vaccine stuff like he has the answers. So I had enough of that, right? I don't want to listen to people that know the answers about vaccines. Nobody knows, right? No one knows. And especially not some lawyer from wherever, who knows where. So here's what Jonathan Turley says, right? 5 minutes until we learn the identity of Mr. X. It has a Marvel feel to it, but there are reports that this is a long-time civil servant and Democrat. We will see if the Dems continue the scorched earth approach to whistleblowers and witnesses. So he's just getting into it. So Mr. X is IRS Special Agent Joe Ziegler, who has been with the agency since 2010, right? So now they start talking about what's going on here. So he disclosed that there's multiple felonies, right? Multiple felonies. And then you get Raskin, the guy who wears the bandana, right? The Representative Raskin. He was in charge of Trump's second impeachment, right? I love that Trump's had 2 impeachments. So he was in charge of Trump's second impeachment. So he did the this is all normal stuff, right? This is come on, what are you talking about, right? He's saying that it's theater of the absurd, despite 2 respected IRS officials declaring that there was special treatment given to Hunter Biden, and now an FBI agent confirming those allegations. Ziegler said that people should not view him as credible as a Democrat and a married gay man. Just have to mention that stuff, right? Because that's what Jonathan Turley said here, and he did say it in his testimony, so we should bring it up. Wish you didn't have to, but that's the world we live in. He analogized the pressure that he has experienced in coming forward to the pressure he felt in coming out. However, he says his credibility comes from his and his colleagues' experience as professional. He clearly does not agree with Raskin that this is all normal. Again, the reason I call this show The Breakup is because we are dealing with relationships, psychological connections, and we're dealing with Bitcoin, of course, and dollars and psychological commodities. So the state of the psychological engine behind these 2 commodities has a lot to do with where we're heading, where we're coming from, and where we're going. And when he puts these terms in leaving a political party to be similar to his sexual orientation, I think he's in the right field here, right? I bet it would feel the same, right? You have all this pressure. It's so unorthodox to do what he's done. It's blasphemous to do what this guy's done, right? Saying that the hero of taking Trump down, Joe Biden, right? He fought the Nazis. He punched the Nazis in the face, right? That this guy is actually a crook and a criminal is very difficult for some people. So he's had that pressure. And so Ziegler goes on to say that the thing about, so Raskin, the guy goes, what about the addiction? Remember the old addiction? What did I call it again? I don't remember. I had a good analogy for what it is. But I had an addiction. What are you gonna do? I'm not guilty, right? I'm not guilty. So Ziegler says that this is no excuse. Ziegler found that he committed these crimes when he was sober and married, and he detailed a series of deductions that he knew were used falsely. So Ziegler says that we all agreed on the felony accounts, including those in 2014, and thinks that a special counsel is needed, right? So a few other people testified yesterday. It looks like it's a lot of money. Some representatives were trying to get him to say who his reporter sources were, right? So they're like, who are your sources? Which is always a big no-no. You should never push people on their media sources. If you spend time in the media like I do and know how hard it is for these journalists to cultivate these relationships, it's always been a big no-no to say who these people are, but it happens in some of the more unsavory testimonies, such as the McCarthyism in America, where this was very, very popular. Jonathan Turley says, Rep. Khanna continued to press Shapley, who is someone else testifying, if he was a source for the media or knew anyone who was. That was more important than addressing allegations of special treatment given the son of a president in a criminal investigation. In the end, it was always like, there's nothing here, nothing to see. And Jonathan Turley sort of captures that. After a hearing detailing memos and transactions supporting the claims of interference, Representative Garcia just declared that there has been no evidence put forward in the hearing, just 2 respected whistleblowers and hundreds of pages of documents and testimony. So again, this idea that there was no information given and nothing to see here, I think, put all this together, what's going on with Hunter, what's going on with 2020, looks exactly like what Neil Howe in Fourth Turning is here says, we don't know what it is, right? Well, my suggestion is if you're living in a gas-lit nation where no one knows the difference between what happened for real, no one can come to agreement. It just depends on which bubble you're in, and the bubble you're in will give you some form of perception on what's going on. That might actually be the crisis that he says he doesn't know about, right? When is it going to be? Now, it could be a war, it could be some of these things, but that's what it looks like, right? That's what it looks like. So even Kyle Becker says the same lines, right? Except for emails. So this is Raskin. There is no evidence that Hunter Biden has received any kind of official favoritism in his prosecution for being Joe Biden's son. Kyle Becker says, except for emails, whistleblower testimony, his former business partner saying otherwise, statements from U.S. attorneys, bank records demonstrating guilt, conclusive proof of tax evasion, dozens of shell companies, lack of FARA registration, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And indeed, they do get into this whole, the 20 shell companies. That was one of the major things that came out of the Marco Polo report from the Hunter Biden laptop. And here we see Kaneko with a great underlining Chairman James Comer's opening statement. So he was the Republican that was chairing this session. And he says, the Bidens created over 20 shell companies, most of which were created when Joe Biden was vice president. Bank records show the Biden family, their business associates, and their companies received over $10 million from foreign nationals and related companies. A lot of this money poured in while Joe Biden was vice president. Despite creating many companies after vice president took office, the Biden family used associates, companies, and blah, 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 money into the various bank accounts. But it always asks the question if that's exactly how you would do it, right? No normal business operates like this. What were the Bidens selling? What were the Bidens selling? Nothing but influence and access to the Biden network, because there's no product. You can't have 20 things and you're not even a consultant necessarily, right? They say consultancy, but that's not really a product. I do a little bit of consulting work, and still there's some form of invoice and some form of consult on what, right? No one lets you just consult, right? As someone who works in already an industry that can be pretty loose and informal, what we have in this Bitcoin space, and I've done plenty of consulting since I was a professional. It's been 10 years that I'm a professional in this space, so I've of course done consulting, and it's very itemized, right? And this is in a impromptu industry where everyone is just sort of jumping to their feet and trying to get this thing going. So there's plenty of details in our invoices. I cannot just invoice a client and say, oh, right, I got to tell them specifically what I do. And it's not even close to the same amount of money these guys are dealing with. And that is exactly what influence peddling looks like, right? It looks like these non-invoice, multiple bank accounts, but no product at all. So there was several other testimonies yesterday, and it looks like now it's pretty clear that we're not getting any sense of what's going on. And as I said, with this fourth turning frame, looking for the crisis, you don't have to look that far. Cernovich, just talking exactly about the testimony yesterday, had this to say. He said, "This is what true patriotism and moral courage looked like," talking about the whistleblowers. "Shapley won't get a book deal as a form of money laundering, no think tank job. And maybe that's the problem. Democrats reward criminals and frauds. Republicans don't even help honest men and women who take grave risk." That's probably true, right? So this whole let's call it national challenge that Neil Howe is waiting for might be here. And when he says it's wars between countries and America and other countries, or between factions of Americans, and then he does go on to prescribe how it all comes together under the American banner. And I believe that. Again, I'm as bullish as he is, and he's completely correct in his predictions about a golden age for America on the horizon. So I'm not trying to make Neil Howe a villain here, right? He's just in a bubble. Like he is living proof of what Glenn Greenwald just mentioned, right? No one will hear about what happened yesterday. It's just not happening. So when you think about his inability to predict or have that input to help him predict, he gets the prediction right, missing the details. When he's saying we're waiting for a fight between two countries in America, and which country, or factions within America, he's correct about the factions within America. But there's another part of it, and you'll hear testimony this morning at the end of this show in 30 minutes. He's probably in some green room getting mic'd up and prepped and reading his notes right now, and that is RFK Jr. He is about to testify at 9 a.m. Eastern Time, right when we're done here, on the weaponization of the federal government. And that lends to what I think Bitcoiners and myself and what we talk about here on the show and what we predict is the actual crisis of World War III. Not countries and countries, not factions of Americans necessarily. That's not exactly the way to put it. More like the weaponization of the federal government against the people. World War III, the American version, is American people against their government. Now, there are American people that are with their government in this fight, right? It's not the government alone versus all the people, but it might change. It might shift to that, right? More and more people are leaving the plantation of Democrat thought and thought that is manufactured by the industrial censorship complex and the industrial military complex and everything that goes on in mainstream American broadcasting. The omission, for example, as Glenn Greenwald said, of testimony relevant to probably the health of the Republic yesterday, the princely son not getting in any trouble for his princely crimes. That whole aspect, right, completely ignored, is a major part. And because that's happening, you're getting more and more people sort of shift out. Now, I get why there are some people that don't want to go from Democrat to their refugee status and immediately to Republicans. I get why people will always have difficulty with Trump, right? I get it. We're not trying to change everyone's mind about Trump and all these things. But you're going to see today, I think, RFK frame what World War III is really about. And when he's talking about in a committee called the weaponization of the federal government, that's what we're dealing with here. That is the enemy. The weaponization of these institutions to be directed onto the American people is the major problem of our times. And you're seeing it more and more. So here he is. He's going to testify on censorship and weaponization of federal agencies. And you can imagine, and just look at the cost already, right? Look at the cost already of having to deal with this obfuscation, with the fog of war descending and the cloak of secrecy descending on almost all aspects of American life. We've been told for a long time that the war in Ukraine is going to be easy thing for the Americans, no problem, right? With a counteroffensive. Now, David Sachs has been bringing up a long time that this is pure fiction. It's not possible. Here's the Wall Street Journal saying yesterday, Ukraine adopts slow approach to counteroffensive. Our problem everywhere is the sky. Swift loss of several tanks, right? They say several, and David Sachs underlines the several. It's 25 tanks, right? 25 armored vehicles. Huge amounts of suffering are happening on the part. And here's the Telegraph today saying Ukraine and the West are facing a devastating defeat. Have you heard about that in America? Right? Probably not. Probably not. So the ability for the federal government to do all of this stuff, to do the Ukraine war, to even keep the propaganda machine running, to keep the censorship machine running, to keep that many federal government employees motivated and incentivized to silence their fellow American citizens, has everything to do with the way that money was set up in this country. It has everything to do with the runaway financial engineering that helps obfuscate and make it so Americans can't really understand what's going on. If you need a Series 7 license and an IQ of 130 just to save money, think about what is required to understand how this thing has been manipulated for 100 years now. It takes a lot of IQ, a lot of history, a lot of understanding, a lot of experience. I'm in a bit of a unique position in that I've worked for a executive branch of a G7 country, right? I worked in Canada with the Prime Minister, and I have a law degree, and that helped. And then I lived all over the world. I lived in Korea and Japan, and I've been a professional Bitcoiner for over 10 years now. So worked on Wall Street for years with Bitcoin, helped start a media company, helped build, I didn't start it, I should say. Felt like starting because CoinDesk moved to New York in 2015. And it was sort of a fresh start. So starting is not the right, I'm not a founder. I don't want to make it sound like I'm a founder. So the position I had was a lot of things bounced my way to be able to get to the point where I can have these frames and this ability to have a bird's eye view into a few things that are really important, right? But that's not everyone, right? So the capacity to even understand the tricks was really complicated for a long time. It's becoming more and more obvious, though. That's the problem that the censorship industrial complex is faced with. It's becoming more and more obvious to more and more people just how manipulated they really are. And here's something coming from Compact Mag, and the Duke Report is coming and saying it, right? Because I've been complaining about the overnight repo rate for a long time. And that is the money that is lent from the Federal Reserve to the commercial banks overnight. I went on all the US mainstream news stations in 2019 for the repo rumble. And I can still remember saying, well, it's $25 billion a day at the time that the Federal Reserve was giving to the commercial banks in America. And as a Bitcoiner, that to me was proof that there was some form of quantitative easing going on. And that's good for the Bitcoin narrative. So that's why I noticed it and was out there sort of mentioning the story. But the problem was no one else in the mainstream media even understood what was going on. They treated us Bitcoiners who went on mainstream media to talk about that like we were just stupid little kids, right? Oh, it's too technical. You don't get the technicalities, right? And I said, well, maybe not, right? Maybe you're right. But what I see is this is not going to end. And indeed it hasn't. It's $2 trillion a day, right? It got up to $2 trillion a day from 25 million. It 10x'd. No, 25 billion. Is that 10x or 100x? I don't know. It's a lot, right? It's a lot bigger. So here's the Duke Report says, right? Overnight repos are shaping the US economy, moving trillions daily. But the increasing reliance on these transactions raises concerns about the growing disconnect between real and financial economies. So if Americans didn't understand that the problem that they face, the crisis they face, is the weaponization of the federal government and the manipulation of media around them so that they're unaware of what's going on in the world, well, it only lasts so far. Eventually you hit a wall when people are poor and miserable, and we're getting there quick. What this article is about, the menace of fictitious capital, is about more or less the Cantillon effect and the tendency of whenever you get financial engineers as the highest paid members of a society, which is a very typical thing, right? The best and brightest go into what is highest paying. So for a generation, the best and brightest have gone into financial engineering, and that has created a massive disconnect between what normal people understand as money and what the people close to the money printer understand as money. And indeed, it's probably why so many people are struggling, because the gravitational forces of what happens here means that housing goes through the roof, and all these the basic affordability of life goes through the roof. I'm in my in-laws, really beautiful suburb here in Canada, and my wife, all the houses here are, so expensive now. And my wife, walking around was like, I remember when I grew up here, like the woman who lived in this house was like a cashier at a grocery store, and it's obviously impossible today. It's nothing but Porsches and this and that in the driveways, and it's a very normal suburban neighborhood, right? And that's because of what happened to the money. So this menace of fictitious capital and what it's done to empower the censorship industrial complex, I think has a Newtonian principle to it, which was equal on opposite reactions, right? So as people are wondering why they're poor and the world is shittier and why Americans are fighting more and all these things, I think it helps actually hone the conversation around manipulation of the media through the manipulation of money. And that's good news for Bitcoin. I mean, really good news, right? Because with that, we're able to really corral the problems in one place and look at them closely. And I think it's going to get easier and easier. I think it is going to get easier and easier. And here's the reason why I think that. Here's how things are getting crazier and crazier in order to blind people. And it goes back to that article from Michael Crichton on aliens causing global warming, right? The one I've mentioned many times, aliens cause global warming. So what he did there was show that the manipulation of science for marketing, in the case of hyping up the Drake equation and getting on television and selling a product, books about the Drake equation and aliens and the thing and and turning science into sales, that extended straight through, he believed, to this selling of global warming as a way to manipulate consumption, as a way to manipulate um, people minds, right? It was a way to reinvigorate, let's say, the Catholic orthodoxy of controlling people through points, reward points to get into heaven, right? This whole system that was in place. If you don't do these things, you'll burn in hell, right? And obviously, what Protestants said, no, it's actually simpler, right? You believe in God and you're good. He loves you no matter what. Don't forget, right? Now, I'm not here to play around with the ticket to heaven, and we're not talking about that debate at all. But that Protestantism offered a much cleaner way, and that's how it erupted in the Protestant Reformation, right? Of course, the third parties that were required to get to heaven in the Catholic system, which is, right, you can't talk directly to God. You got to go to the thing where you tell all your secrets to the priest, and then he gets to do the interlocution with God, right? So the Catholic system was sort of a third party involved to talk to God system. And that's what Luther said. No. You can have a personal relationship. You don't need any of this stuff. Let's just rock and roll this way. And that was devastating to what was the information censorship complex, industrial complex of that era. And so we arrive here now and think about what Michael Crichton said, right? Aliens cause global warming. It's really the manipulation of the media that caused global warming, and the idea of, and science, right? The manipulation of these institutions, not just media, many institutions. The complete corruption of these institutions led to this thing. And now, right, on cue, as people are wondering about what's going on in Ukraine and what's going on with all of these things, right? This is from Michael Gimmerin, and this is what he says is happening right now. We don't know, but I'm going to tell you what he says, right? Attention, Operation Bluebeam Aliens is a go. So remember the title I had a few weeks ago? We see UFOs because the US owes, right? This is more or less the same, right? That's where I'm headed with this. The largest disinformation campaign in human history is beginning. Over the next few months, the governments of the world are going to reveal that for hundreds of years, they have had access to alien technology, that previous governments allowed this technology to be guarded and studied in secret by government labs, then third-party contractors. But due to changes in perspective and values and threats to national security, these companies will no longer be permitted to have this alien technology. Going forward, for our safety, the governments are going to reconfiscate this technology and ban all non-approved research. They will enact a level of censorship and surveillance as well as military funding to fight the alien threat, unlike what we have ever seen. There might even be bodies, but no non-approved independent DNA testing. Oh, they're aliens. They don't have DNA. It's all so exotic. It's all a lie. There are no aliens. There is advanced human civilization tech lost to history, like what Nikola Tesla worked on. That has the potential to disrupt the entire order. The proliferation of independent research into the technology, as well as a desire for totalitarian surveillance, are driving this disinformation campaign of blue beaming us. It is the independent people developing this tech via sharing notes over the internet which most threatens the status quo. That is the real goal and motive behind this sudden disclosure. Changing government stance on this tech, which everyone from the US to the Nazis has been in a race to acquire. Yes, this. Hold on. I just changed it. Anyway, all efforts will be aimed at requiring compliance to a new research data censorship regime. No independent research into alien technology will be permitted. They might even go so far as to ban encryption for fear that people are trading illegal alien technology in secret. The word has gone out, and I'm now hearing it from multiple contacts throughout the government. It's so bold, I still can't believe it. My best hope is I'm totally wrong, and I have to retract in a few months. We are seeing the selective release of UAP talking points throughout the info environment by previous known regime actors. I don't know if Twitter is compromised. Incredible. The only question you would be asking your friends is why now, right? The answer is that the internet is preventing the control and classification of this previously secret info. Now, I don't know any of this, if it's true, right? I don't know any of it. And I don't think it's going to work out the way he's saying. I don't think they're going to be able to confiscate technology and create new censorship regimes and bust up encryption, right? Because I think most people are savvy. These are low IQ individuals left in this system that are trying a last-ditch effort to reset history. But like Neil Howe does get correct, he does get this correct. Americans are going to pull together and find a way to make a happier way, a happier system. So this is what Neil Howe ends up saying, right? Yet Americans will also gain by the end of a fourth turning a unique opportunity to achieve a new greatness as a people. They will be able to solve long-term national problems and perhaps lead the way in solving global problems as well. By the mid-2030s, America will exit winter and enter spring. The first turning will begin. And he goes on to say that public trust will be stronger, institutions more effective, and national optimism higher. Yet the culture will be tamer, social conscience weaker, and pressure to conform heavier. I'm not sure if he's right about that. What I think is going to happen is literally Bitcoin, right? It's Bitcoin. Bitcoin is the way to reorient our information, our media broadcasting. Just look at Nostr. Go on Nostr and just get the feeling of it for a second. It's still missing people, characters, a little bit of energy, but you don't have that feeling. Sometimes when I'm on Twitter and accidentally I do the for you instead of following algorithm, I can feel it. I can feel when I'm on the for you algorithm versus the following algorithm. And when I'm on Nostr, the feeling is even more liberating because you're not getting fed, even within who you're following, some algorithmic preference for fighting. And, I'm sick of seeing the fighting. I'm sick of it, right? I know what's happening. I'm not trying to avoid shit, right? I know what's happening. So the idea here is that we know what the crisis is. It's the psyops, it's the manipulation, it's the fake news and the hypnosis. And weirdly, that's one of the main things Bitcoin actually fixes, right? Bitcoin, by reorienting government, by taking away national security capacity, power, interest, and by diluting all of the things that I think RFK is going to be talking about today. RFK is talking exactly about this, the weaponization of federal institutions against the American people. That's the frame of World War III. Howe has a blind spot to not understand that it's not factions of America fighting. Don't worry about Democrat, Republican. That will blow away. It's not going to last. Right? We're not going to have nations the way we had them before. Because the money printer is going to get shut off. Our idea of nations is an anomaly in history and has only because armies changed, military changed, and finally money changed to support this whole thing. But the whole idea that they can fund themselves off of your birth certificate and off of your name and throw a shit ton of debt on you ain't going to fly anymore. Financial literacy is going through the roof because of Bitcoin. And Americans are not going to stand for it any longer. They'll be the first to fight against this, and they'll show the rest of the world what to do and how to be successful in this fight. So there you are. All right, let's see where the comments have us today. We got some good ones. Hold on. Let's see where we are. Justin, Ozempic sales through the roof. Yeah, well, look, we're not into it. This one's good. Instructions unclear. Increase means. Justin likes the food, right? If you guys don't follow Justin, he's got a really great, we call him Jiva here, but he's got a really great Substack on food, eating grass-fed, and how to make tallow and some really great stuff. I bought a bunch of tallow, by the way, Justin. I still haven't made it. I've got a bunch frozen right now in my freezer. I got to try and make it, but haven't been doing that. Don't enjoy, just work. Billy, I owe you still. Good morning from Greece. We are going to win, Billy. We're winning. Weather modification is real. Why don't they talk about that when they talk about climate change? They're not going to do that. And yeah, I do think weather modification. I mean, I remember when they started it in Russia. Very real. We thought about doing it a little in Canada once too. Good morning, Anthony. Hope you're doing well. Aliens gave us Bitcoin to advance our planet to the next stage of civilization. Maybe. I don't believe in aliens, though, by the way. I'm not sure where this is streaming from. Melissa, it is streaming from Bitcoin Magazine and Nolan Bowerly, myself, Count BTC, as I call myself sometimes. Yeah, so Matthew, I'm not a just because I believe in simulation theory pretty extensively and the Bible, and neither of them really talk too much about aliens. There are other beings. We've seen those, right? There's demons and all kinds of crazy stuff, but who could be considered aliens? I'm a big fan of the Thomas Alberino stuff, if any of you guys have ever come across that. But the simulation theory about aliens is simply that it would be too difficult to coordinate two separate histories and have it would be like running parallel video games, like an independent character-led game of Zelda and a completely separate game of I don't know, Mario, and then somehow they interact. Too complicated. The amount of now we can find ancient civilizations because in simulation theory you can actually write history backwards, right? You get that, right? You don't. It doesn't have to have happened. There might not be a fossil below me in this house right now, but if it's required in order to find history in reverse, it might actually be there. So there you go. In his book, he said January 6th protesters brought weapons. Yeah, Andy, sorry. That's what I'm getting at. I'm not reading his shitty book. All right. I'm getting to that point. I get the frames. I'm going to get the reviews. And I appreciate Neil Howe. I do. But he is a dumb DC shitlib. Thank you. He is exactly that. Good morning, team. And he's yeah. No, Andy. Once again, we don't have to I wanted to bring that in to light that I'm a fan of the frame the person is an idiot. Right? Good evening, night shifters. Indeed, Robert. Good evening. And I don't know. Yeah, whatever it is I'm talking about, I don't know. Yeah, I don't know. Whatever it is. Whatever Henry is saying, I don't know. It's probably true. Good morning, Ben. Good morning, Ben. UTXO. Yeah, that's what I mean. The math of the Drake equation is simple and correct. Absolutely. Right. So I'm not arguing with that. But it's absolutely meaningless because it just multiplies lots of unknown values. Precisely. I'm not saying it's completely invalid, but it was how you sell a product, right? And that's what Michael Crichton was bringing up. Michael Crichton hated that Drake equation, hated it, right? And so I am a student of Michael Crichton, and so because of that, I can't help but hate it as well. It's not money that is the source of all evil. It is greed. The ability of Bitcoin to level the playing field or to take away the ability for extreme. Hold on, Eddie. Hold on. No. Bitcoin does not fix greed at all. At all. Satoshi's greatest invention is that he took us how we are. He took our greed and just redirected it. We're still as greedy as we ever were, and we will be on a Bitcoin standard as greedy as ever will. It'll change time preference. So it'll change how you get dopamine. It'll rewire your brain, but greed ain't going anywhere, right? That's baked in. That's baked in. We are all sinners, my friend. We are not. That is not going away from Bitcoin. We'll just sin differently. My favorite thing about George Gammon is that he calls the cerveza. I like the cerveza sickness. Yeah, it is funny. This is funny. Seriously, aliens? Yeah, why not? Aliens. Yeah. I'm still waiting for the plot twist which reveals that this is all a clickbaity joke. I don't know. Your previous mention of the 420 is the best book summary that the Van Nuys said is one of my fave videos on YouTube. Thanks, Defina. Yeah, isn't it beautiful? I recommend it to everyone. And Van Nuys does a sort of better job than Neil Howe himself. So I'm waiting for Van Nuys the second version of it, right? Do you have a list of notes somewhere where a reference to each of your breakup videos? Sometimes I want to listen to a specific thing you covered in some. Yeah, I don't really do that, Lucky. A little bit of work. If I ever hire any staff to help me with the show after the fact, it would be for specific things like that. But I'm still in the place where I'm trying to make the show as replicatable as possible. So I don't want to take too much extra time, right? It's what I got. Charles Akakpo, pas en français, mais peut-être une fois. Peut-être je vais faire une émission une fois en français, un matin. On verra. On verra. Peut-être un jour. I'm grateful to have stumbled upon this show somehow. You're a great teacher that I never had. Great, really. Thank you, Lucky. I appreciate that, man. I appreciate that. Really appreciate that. Government is a scam. You got that right, Kareem. You got that right. Do the Bitcoin, Beardy. We are doing Bitcoin big time. Hunter must have the worst digital security habits ever. If he had Bitcoin, they would be in it. You're completely right, Robert. Yeah, he is definitely not a Bitcoiner, right? We can say that. I should have said his password is 1234. Yeah. Exactly accurate. Hi from Ethiopia. Amazing. Amazing. Welcome from Ethiopia. Welcome. All and every social media platforms, both development and administration, is via DARPA. Thus, each and every platform is a mockingbird enterprise. 99.5% of all media is compromised. I think that's true. I think that's true. I think that's true. That's why we like Bitcoin media, because that's about all we can do. Right? We're the only ones that lived apart from this. We need to decentralize government, absolutely. And that is so when I say that the fight of World War III is between governments and people, the inevitable result is we will decentralize it. Right? So that's what we want. Solution action, Deloise, decentralized localization, encryption, and blockchain. I like that. Deloise. Put AI on patent research. Mm-hmm. I don't know. Put AI on a patent search. Brian Romello's already done that. He's already charted. You don't have to do patent search. He's done all the patent mapping in the history of the world with his AI. So media are aliens. I don't know if I said that. No, they're not aliens, Matthew. Media. When I say aliens cause global warming, what we're really saying is the idea that you can believe in aliens is the same force that's allowing you to believe in global warming. And it's the same force that's allowing you to believe in the dollar. So that aliens caused belief in the dollar, or belief in aliens caused belief in the dollar, is what will evaporate and allow hyperbitcoinization to come in. I thought that was all satire. The note I read, well, maybe. It didn't. No, it was. He means it really. The guy who was reading about the aliens. Yeah. Let's make aliens the new Pepes in front. That's not a bad idea. That's not a bad idea at all. Went on river/falls walk, and the people were wonderful. Yeah, I don't. What are we talking about here? Let me know, Randmore. I forget. Oregon. A thumbs up. I'm still learning. Panic people about climate change. Take freedoms away. Tax them and say you will fix them. Then use those taxes to take more freedoms away. Dangerous cocktail. Dangerous cocktail. But true. Timothy Alberino. Is that who I said? Yeah, I think that I might have got his name wrong, but he's great. Go watch his videos. A lot of fun. His take on aliens is as close as I'll come, and he has a very strict biblical reading of Nephilim and all these things. So very excellent stuff, right? I saw a picture of people that brought flags on. Imagine that, flags in DC. Yeah. Muslim Bitcoiner. Great episode as always. Thank you. Assalamu alaikum. Muslim Bitcoiner. The freshman that took down Stanford. Yeah, isn't it amazing? The Stanford prof. President. Scammer. As much of a scammer as SBF. Thanks, Randmore. They live. Aliens live. If the dollar were backed by Bitcoin, why would the government be selling the Bitcoin they do have? Because RFK is just a candidate, and they're not jumping on his opinion. They're stupid fiat brain people trying to protect Hunter Biden. Like, who cares? People are hungry for normal interaction. They sure are. Yeah, they sure are. Pesky aliens. The stupid aliens. All right, team. That's what I got for today. I hope y'all have a great day. I'm going to see some family. I'm going to play with my kids. I got some work. I got some emails to send out. I'm a little ramping up on Amsterdam. So busy with all of that stuff. So I hope you all have a great day. I'm probably going to head to Montreal tomorrow. So I'll be here tomorrow morning. I'll do maybe one more here. I hope the quality is coming through. I've had to decrease the resolution on the screen to make sure I come across strong and it doesn't jump on the audio. Let me know if there's any trouble. Randmore with a good show. Thank you, Randmore. Peace, everyone. No fear / peace. Yeah, no fear and peace. We love it.